Good evening once again, Masa al-Khair. My name is Yusuf Munayer. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Jerusalem Fund, I'm very happy to welcome you all here for the event this evening, and of course welcome as well the audience that we have watching this event online. Before we get into this evening's program, just a few announcements. First, if anyone who has a phone or anything else that might disturb our presentations this evening, if you could silence them, we'd appreciate that. And also just wanted to draw your attention to a few ongoing and upcoming events and programs that we have here at the Jerusalem Fund at this time. I wanted to announce all the upcoming events that we have, but we have so many of them that I'm not able to do that all in this time. But I would like you to please check out the information table that we have outside with all of the upcoming art exhibits, films, lectures, panels, conferences that are going to be taking place this fall. And there's certainly something there for everybody. And of course, our live stream audience can find information about all these events online. A couple that I'd like to highlight for those who are in this room or may be able to come is Fractured Spring, which is the current exhibit that we have by Helen Ghareeb, which is a really fantastic exhibit on display now and will be for the next few weeks until October 17th. And on October 13th, we have our annual Edward Said Memorial Lecture being delivered by Dr. Judith Butler, entitled "What is the Value of Palestinian Lives?" And it is sure to be a very thought-provoking and important presentation. Again, that is Monday, October 13th from 12:30 to 2. Between these events and after them, we have many more, so again, please do check them out. As far as it relates to this evening's event, earlier this year, almost 40 days ago now, Palestine lost one of its giants, particularly in the realm of poetry, and that was, of course, Samih al-Qasim. And this evening we have put together a program in which we want to commemorate the life and the contributions of Samih al-Qasim as a poet and as a figure in the Palestinian struggle and cause. And we've put together a truly unique program that I think will be informative and also moving. It is going to include presentations in both English and Arabic. So if you speak only one of those languages, we ask you to bear with us in the process. But I'm sure for those of you who can appreciate the languages, and of course when it comes to poetry, the appreciation in the original language is of the utmost importance. I'm sure you will find it particularly moving and impressive. Our presenters tonight are several, and they include Dr. Clovis Maksoud, who is on his way now and will be here shortly. Of course, he's a man who needs no introduction. I'm sure many in the room are familiar with him, and he will be providing a closing comment at the end of this evening. Then we will start with a presentation by Dr. Shawki Kassis, and Dr. Shawki is a truly unique individual. Many of you may be familiar with the idea that people are one of two ways. In Arabic, we often refer to it as, the ilmi track and the adabi track. Not many people are proficient in both directions, but Dr. Kassis is one of those truly impressive people who holds a PhD in microbiology and biochemistry, but is also a wordsmith and a poet and proficient in the Arabic language in a very impressive way. So we're happy to have him share a presentation on Samih al-Qasim and present some Arabic recitation of Samih's poetry as well. Then we will have presentation of Samih al-Qasim's poetry in English by Dr. Edmund Ghareeb, who I recently learned was among the first to translate Samih al-Qasim's poetry into English in the 1970s. And so we'll be treated to that. Then we will have a special presentation of an original creation of poetry in commemoration of Samih al-Qasim by Mr. Walid Keilani, who is a Palestinian poet, and one of our board members here at the Jerusalem Fund, and I'm truly looking forward to that. Also, we have at the table here in the corner copies of the poems that will be read this evening by Mr. Keilani in Arabic, so if anyone would like to pick up a copy of that, please do. We will close then with a presentation of excerpts by Zeina Azzam from a correspondence that took place for a number of years between Samih al-Qasim and the famed Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, his partner in the journey of poetry for Palestine. So with that, I thank you again for joining us this evening, and I will turn it over at this point to Dr. Kassis.
Assalamu alaikum. Allow me a minute or two to get this nasty cane on the side and to get my paper out. And Yusuf you will not count my arrangement time as part of the time allocated to me. I found it. Okay, my apology to those who do not understand Arabic. The presentation is going to be only in Arabic. So those of you who do not understand Arabic, اذهبوا تعلموا العربية وعلموها للناس. What is this for? It looks like a gun. سميح محمد قاسم حسين اسمه الكامل. كما تعلمون أو أكثركم يعلم سميح هو من قرية الرامة الجليلية، قريتي. سامعيني؟ أهلين سابا. وهناك علاقة صداقة قوية ومتينة بين عائلتينا منذ أجيال. الرامة ها هي، ترون في هذه الصورة جبل حيدر الشامخ ملء الأبدية، وهذا هو الثلثين الشرقيين من الرامة. هذا هو بيت سميح القاسم حاليا، وفي مركز الحارة الشرقي هنا تقريبا منازل آل حسين عائلة سميح. اسم العائلة الرسمي هو حسين وليس القاسم. قاسم هو جد سميح لأبيه. إذا بتطلعوا في دليل هواتف الرامي تفتحوا نمرة سميح القاسم، بدك تطلع على حرف الحاء مش حرف القاف. عائلة حسين أو آل حسين نزحوا من القسم الشرقي من شبه الجزيرة، حيث كان المناذرة والحيرة وبني تغلب وغيرهم، إلى الرامة في فلسطين في القرن السابع عشر، على الأرجح أيام حكم الأمير فخر الدين المعني الثاني الكبير. سميح هو السادس بين 10 أشقاء وشقيقات، 6 زائد 4، وله أيضا 3 أخوات غير شقيقات، 2 من زواج أمه الأول و1 من زواج أبيه الأول. تزوج من نوال، السيدة نوال، وهي أيضا من آل حسين، وأنجبا 4 أبناء: وطن محمد، وضاح، عمر، وياسر. اسمحوا لي بكلمة لدقيقة أو دقيقتين عن الشعر المقاوم في فلسطين ورموزه. ضد تحويل حياض الروض في أرض خنادق، ضد أن تصبح أغصان بساتيني مشانق، ضد ما شئتم، ولكن بعد إحراق رفاقي وبلادي وشبابي كيف لا تصبح أشعاري بنادق. هؤلاء الشعراء اللي سأذكرهم كانوا يكتبون بشظية ولكن أيضا يغنون للسلام. فإذا نظرنا نظرة خاطفة إلى الجيل الرعيل الأول نرى الأسماء التي جميعنا نعرفها ونقدسها، ابتداء من نوح إبراهيم الشاعر الشعبي، من سجن عكا وطلعت جنازي، محمد جمزوم وفؤاد حجازي، جازي عليهم يا شعبي جازي، المندوب السامي وربعه عموما. عبد الرحيم محمود الشاعر الشهيد، ولد 1913 وقتل استشهد عام 48. لا حاجة للتعريف بعبد الكريم الكرمي أو أبو سلمى وأبو إبراهيم طوقان. وأيضا وديع البستاني، هذا اللبناني من نسل بطرس البستاني وإبراهيم البستاني وفؤاد إفرام البستاني، عاش معظم حياته البالغة في حيفا في فلسطين، وكتب الشعر وناضل بالشعر وبالنثر أيضا، واعتبر نفسه فلسطينيا. جاء عام إتمام عملية السطو المسلح على فلسطين، وظهر جيل آخر، رئيس هذا الجيل ومؤسس شعر المقاومة في أرض المجابهة في الداخل الفلسطيني هو راشد حسين، المرحوم راشد حسين. كتب الشعر منذ 54، 6 سنوات بعد ما احتلونا، واجه حكومة الصهاينة، واجه الدولة الصهيونية. لا مجال لتلاوة أي من أشعاره، ولكن كل بيت شعر كتبه بمثابة مدفع أو قنبلة. ثم أتى جيل محمود وسميح ومعهم توفيق زياد، رغم أن توفيق زياد أكبر من راشد حسين ب6 سنوات، لكنه لم يكتب الشعر إلا متأخرا في حياته حينما قارب 30 من عمره. وسالم جبران وغيرهم مثل شكيب جشان، حنا أبو حنا، عصام العباسي وكثيرين غيرهم. جميع هؤلاء حملوا جوازات السفر الصهيونية وعاشوا تحت وطأة الدولة الصهيونية. جميعهم قد فارقوا هذه الحياة وفارقونا باستثناء حنا أبو حنا 85 سنة عمره، أطال الله في عمره. قلنا وديع البستاني هذا هو منزله. بدي أتعلم أسوق عليها مظبوط. هاي هون منزل وديع البستاني، لا يزال قائما في حي جمال في حيفا قرب الشاطئ. كلمات قصيرة ومقتضبة عن سميح، مقاوم متحد وثائر ومحرض على الثورة في أشعاره وفي مواقفه وآرائه. رفض الخدمة الإجبارية في الجيش الصهيوني، وكانت مفروضة هذه الخدمة على أبناء الطائفة المعروفية الدروز، وسجن. بالواقع 3 مرات حاول الهروب إلى لبنان، ولكن بعض المعارف من القرى الموجودة بين الرامة وبين الحدود اللبنانية كل مرة كانوا يرجعوه، لأنه راح على لبنان ممكن يقتلوه هناك. لم يعش سميح إلا في قريته الرامة. عمل لسنين طويلة رئيس تحرير صحيفة كل العرب الصادرة من الناصرة، وكان يسافر يوميا من بيته في الرامة إلى الناصرة إلى مكتبه، 40 كيلومتر على الشارع روحة و40 رجعة. لم يعش إلا في الرامة، فهو ملتزم حتى بالوجوده العضوي مع الوطن. اللهم إلا في فترة الستينات حين فرضت عليه الإقامة الجبرية والاعتقال المنزلي عليه وعلى العديد من الناشطين والشعراء منهم محمود في حيفا. خلينا نعرف هذا الاحتلال الصهيوني هو احتلال إنساني يرفق بالناس ويعطف عليهم. من إنسانيته الفائقة خير سميح: وين بدك نحبسك؟ في الرامي ولا في حيفا؟ سميح كان يعمل كغيره في صحف ومجلات الحزب الشيوعي الصادرة في حيفا، فاختار حيفا. بين عام 64 و 66 أنهيت دراستي الثانوية واشتغلت وسكنت في حيفا لمدة 2 سنين، وكنت أعمل في بقالة بالجملة لصاحبها اسمه مالك سويدان في شارع يافا، وكانت هذه البقالة مسافة بيت أو بيتين عن الدار التي كان سميح ساكن فيها. إقامة جبرية واعتقال منزلي. الاعتقال المنزلي آنذاك عنا ممنوع تغادر منزلك من 6 مساء إلى 6 صباحا، وكان يجي الجندي موظف الحاكم العسكري مرات عديدة بعد الساعة 6 تيمضي اللي موجود هناك إنه موجود ما تركش المنزل. فكنت أنا أكم متر عن دار سميح، أخلص شغل وأروح أقعد عنده، نشرب قهوة في الأول، نبتلع زجاجة أو 2 من العرق، وبعدين سميح بده يطلع يشم الهواء يشوف يدور، فأنا أقعد محله في الدار حتى أمضي عنه. ويجي الجندي ولا الموظف ما يطلعش، يطلع بس على طبق الفطاير والمناقيش وعسلة التين، ياكل ما يطلعش علي، أمضي له ويضل من إقلاع. مرات أضلني أستنى للساعة 12 وحدي لأنه مو معرض يجي على الساعة 1 الصبح، وأروح على البيت وين كنت أنا ساكن في شارع عباس فوق المعبد البهائي، وكنت شاركت الغرفة مع محمود درويش. فمرة من المرات روحت أنا الساعة 12، قال لي يا زلمة شو بعدك داية بتدور؟ ليش هالقد بتتأخر؟ قلت له هيك أنا مضيت لسميح. قال لي شو معي أنا؟ ذوي الجيرة أولى بالمعروف. فقلت له تهكلش الهم، فقعدت ليلة روحت بكير، وإجا الأفندي الخواجة ومضيت له، فيش 10 دقائق ولا محمود راجع وجهه أصفر عرقه بمصي، بقول لي إجا؟ قلت له إجا، ومضيت له وانقلع. شو مالك؟ شو سيرتك؟ ليش هيك صايبك؟ قال لي إنه عم بيطلع على أشياء معروضة في الدكاني، رفع نظاراته حتى يقرأ الكتابة. انتبه إنه ما وصاني أحط نظارات طبية على عيني حتى ما يشك فيي ويفكرني مش محمود هذا الجندي اللي بده يجي أمضي له. بنرجع لسميح القاسم. ثورته ومقاومته وعدم مساومته ظاهرة مش بس في أشعاره اللي بدأت له أشياء منها، بل أيضا في عناوين دواوينه. انظروا إلى هذه العناوين الصارخة لعدد من دواوينه الشعرية: دمي على كفي، إلهي إلهي لماذا قتلتني، دخان البراكين، ويكون أن يأتي طائر الرعد، وما قتلوه وما صلبوه وإنما شبه لهم. والآن إلى أمثلة، سطر أو سطرين كل مرة لأشعار ثائرة غاضبة مقاومة لا تساوم كتبها سميح القاسم. يا عدو الشمس لا يساوم، لكن لن أساوم، وإلى آخر نبض في عروقي سأقاوم وأقاوم وأقاوم. أبدا على هذا الطريق راياتنا بصر الضرير وصوتنا أمل الغريق، أبدا جحيم عدونا، أبدا نعيم للصديق. ومن الجليل إلى المثلث صرخة، ومن المحيط إلى الخليج نداء، عربية كانت وتبقى أرضنا عربية، وليصخب الأعداء. كثيرون منكم لا يعرفون ما هو المثلث. في الأساس المثلث هي قطعة أرض كبيرة تشكل مثلث متساوي الأضلاع، رؤوسه مدن جنين، نابلس، وطول كرم. شايفين جنين، طول كرم، ونابلس. مثلث متساوي رؤوس، مثلث متساوي الأضلاع، طول ضلعه 30 كيلومتر. هاي الكلمة مثلث أطلقت على هاي المنطقة في الأساس، ولكن السيد عبد الله ابن الحسين وهب الصهاينة عام 48-49 في محادثات الشوني السرية، وهبهم قطاع من أخصب أراضي فلسطين، وهذا القطاع من الأرض يمتد من مدينة أم الفحم إلى الجنوب الغربي قليلا من الناصرة، بعرض بين 2 و6 كيلومترات، ويمتد جنوبا 70 كيلومتر إلى منطقة اللد والرملة. وهبهن إياها ابن حرام. عبد الرحمن خزقية من قرية الطيري في المثلث. ظلينا نطلق على هذا القطاع الذي وهبه عبد الله اسم المثلث، لأنه يجاور مثلث جنين، نابلس، طول كرم. كمان وحي الشعب، قصيدة عمودية فيها نكهة بشار بن برد وأبو طيب المتنبي. غير اللواء الحر لا نترسم، وبغير صك جراحنا لا نقسم، ولغير قدس الشعب لسنا ننحني، وبغير وحي الشعب لا نتكلم. فلتشرب الرايات نخب جراحنا كأسا يفيض على جوانبها الدم. تقدروا تكملوا قراءة للي بحب. هذه أبيات من قصيدة كتبها عام 62 في طفولته الشعرية. بعض الأغاني صرخة لا تطرب، فإذا استفزتكم أغاني يغضب. يا منشئين على خرائب منزلي، تحت الخرائب نقمة تتقلب. إن كان جذعي للفؤوس ضحية، جذري إله في الثرى يتأهب. هذا أنا أسرجت كل متاعبي، ودمي على كفي يغني فاشربوا. صدر بها ديوان بعنوان دمي على كفي. بس كمان قطعة زيادة. له قصيدة بتجنن فيها موسيقى عذبة جدا، عنوانها زغردت بنت الأكابر. يخاطب فيها مرجى بن عامر. نادتك ناصرة الجليل وزغردت بنت الأكابر، فانفض تراب الموت وانهض من ضريحك يا ابن عامر. هذا عم بغلبني. بالعكس، متأسف، أنا معي واحد. أيوة. فانفض تراب الموت وانهض من ضريحك يا ابن عامر. أنا مشتر عدد التحدي، فلتبع أمي الأساور. سأرد كيد الكائدين بكل ثائرة وثائر. الله أعطاهم ترابك فاستفيقي يا ضمائر. لو صح أن الله أعطاهم أنا بالله كافر. في القصيدة إشارات إلى عام إتمام السطو المسلح على فلسطين، حيث النصراويات قطعنا مشيا على الأقدام مرج بن عامر هروبا أو عودة إلى الناصرة. وفي أغنية نصراوي أصيلي: قطعنا النصراويات مرج بن عامر، ولما قطعنا المرج لحنا بالأساور. كانوا يبيعوا أساورهم تيش بالمصاري حتى الثوار يشتروا بنادق. الكثيرون منا سمعوا هذه الأبيات من طائر الرعد على الميادين أو على أي فضائية أخرى ما زالت ملتزمة بالعروبة. شيء روائعه بلا حد، شيء يسمى في الأغاني طائر الرعد، لا بد أن يأتي فلقد بلغناها، بلغنا قمة الموت. كرميل كلمة آرامية تعني كروم الله. احتلوا البلد في 48، ولكن بقيت بقية في البلد، 150 ألف فلسطيني ظلوا في البلد. هذول يملكون 99% من كواشين الطابلة، الأراضي الزراعية والصخرية. فالحكومة الصهيونية بدها تشلحهم الأراضي، فبلشت تخترع قوانين. من القوانين اللي اخترعتها ووسائل ثعلبية مختلفة، من القوانين اللي اخترعتها قانون سموه حاضر غائب. أي إنسان تواجد في أي قطر عربي عام 48-49 وعاد في تلك الفترة أو بعدها إلى بلده وبيته، في عرفهم هذا هو إنسان غائب رغم أنه حاضر موجود. إذا ماله حلال عليهم وأملاكه حلال عليهم. صادروا كثير من الأراضي بهذه الطريقة وطرق أخرى. يعلنوا المنطقة منطقة عسكرية ممنوع حدا يفوت عليها. في الخمسينات صادروا بدون أي عذر أراضي تابعة لقرى 5: مجد الكروم، هسه بنشوف هون على الخريطة، مجد الكروم، دير الأسد، البعني، نحف بلد علي فطوم اللي بيعرف عليه، والرامة. صادروها لينشئوا عليها مدينة سماها سميح القاسم مدينة الحقد والجوع والجماجم. وفي ذلك قال المرحوم راشد حسين: وكرم الله لا يبنى على الإجرام. وأنشأ سميح قصيدة في ذلك. انتبهوا، دشنوا هذه المدينة الحقد والجوع والجماجم عام 60، وكان شعارهم الذي يرددونه، كنت حينها في الصف الثامن وأحفظ ذلك عن ظهر قلب: كرميل سنة 70 ألف. الآن في 2014 يسكن في كرميل على الأكثر 42 ألف إنسان فقط، منهم 5 إلى 6 آلاف عرب ضاقت قراهم المحاصرة بهم فابتاعوا لهم منازل في كرميل. صباح مساء يطالعنا وجهها والسماء، ونبسم لا بسمة الأغبياء لكنها بسمة الأنبياء. تحداهم مكابر تافه يغطي الشموس ببعض رداء. ويختمها بهذا القول في السطر الأخير، القول الإبداعي الفذ: هنا سفر تكوينهم ينتهي، هنا سفر تكويننا في ابتداء. حيدر الشامخ ملء الأبدية كما قال سميح القاسم، ولكن قال شيء أجمل بكثير من هيك في نفس القصيدة، قصيدة عشق في الرامة. قال: سألوني نسبا قلت أبي حيدر الشامخ ملء الأبدية، وأنا الرامة أمي فاعلموا أنني نسل نبي ونبية. ترون في هذه الصورة المكان الذي التقطت منه. هذا المكان اسمه المطل على شارع الرامي ترشيحة، يرتفع 800 متر عن سطح البحر أو حوالي 400 متر تحت قمة حيدر. وقرى الشاغور اللي صادروا أراضيها، وهذه هي الطرف الشرقي من مدينة كرميل، وهو مركز تجاري ومنطقة صناعية على أراضي سرقوها من أهل الرامة. راح أفشق هاي لأنه عم بنق علي يوسف. سميح القاسم أطلق عليه الكثير من الألقاب، وكل لقب أطلق عليه يشرف أي شاعر. أنا أرغب أن نسميه شاعر النبوءات والصهيل. نبوءات تنبأ عن أحداث وكوارث وأعياد الشعب الفلسطيني قبل أن تحدث بعشرات السنين. يكفي أن تطالع قصائده التي قالها أو كتبها في الستينات والسبعينات لتدرك ذلك. أمثلة قليلة. كتب لسنوات عن انتفاضة أو انتفاضات لم تحدث بعد. 72 فجر ما يثقل روحك من أورام الشهوات، هات وهات، ما زالت في الأرض حجارة، ما زالت بضع زجاجات فارغة نقذفها في وجه الدبابات. رأيت رأي العين مقاتلا في العاشرة، رأيت رأي العين مقاتلا في العاشرة، يمشي بلا ساقين، يمشي بلا ساقين ووجهه للناصرة، يمشي بلا ساقين ووجهه للناصرة. في القدس تطلع للمجوس كواكب، وعلى جبال النار رجع قتال، هي خطوة أخرى وقشرة موزة، ويمرغ المحتل في الأوحال. كان طلاب المدارس في الناصرة يرمون قشر الموز على الشارع وقت المظاهرات، عل وعسى ينزلق عليها جندي أو شرطي وهو يلاحق المظاهرة، أو إن شاء الله سيارة من سياراتهم تنزلق عليها، وهذه الإشارة إلى ذلك. بعينها الكحيلة، بالشفة البتول، بالزهرة الحمراء، بالجديلة، حبيبتي حبيبتي أميرة الفصول، تقاوم المدافع الثقيلة، تقاوم المدافع الثقيلة. من طرف المخيم يأتون، من خنادق التحدي في شارع تهدم، يأتون من كهف ومن خرابة، ويبصقون دمهم في جبهة الدبابة. أكتفي بذلك، فقط جملتين فقط يا يوسف. لماذا سميته شاعر الصهيل؟ أود أن ألفت انتباهكم، ارجعوا وطالعوا قصائدهم، خاصة قصيدة غوانتنامو، قصيدة تغريبة إلى محمود درويش، لتدركوا هذا الإيقاع. صهيل متواصل وإيقاع يشبه الزحف العسكري، مارش عسكري، تتكرر فيه التفعيلة خبطة وراء خبطة، تفعيلة وراء تفعيلة وراء تفعيلة، حتى تكون جملا شعرية تمتد على صفحة أو صفحتين من القصيدة. ومثال بارز على ذلك قصيدة تغريبة لمحمود درويش، كان بودي أن أقرأها ولكن سرقنا الوقت، فأشكركم على صبركم. أمرك سيدي.
Thank you very, very much, Dr. Kassis. That was a very important background and introduction to Samih al-Qasim's work. And for those of you who followed in Arabic, I'm sure you were able to enjoy that very much. And for those who were not, we're now going to be treated to presentations, recitations of Samih al-Qasim's poetry in English by Dr. Edmund Ghareeb. So I'll ask Dr. Ghareeb to join us now.
Thank you, Yusuf. This certainly was an eloquent and moving presentation that we just heard from Professor Dr. Kassis. It's certainly a very forceful, very moving, very personal account of his, particularly since he brought his own personal connection. Unfortunately, I never met Samih al-Qasim in person, although I came to know him through a friend of mine, Bushra Karaman, who was a very close friend of Samih al-Qasim and who actually was the person to introduce me to his work. This was actually around 1969, 1970, when Nasir Aruri and I, my good friend Nasir, Professor Aruri, we were very much impressed with the writings of Palestinian poets, young poets who were transforming Arabic poetry in their own way and who were expressing their love of their land and their commitment to remain on that land. And we decided actually to publish these translations. We found each other through publishing translations of some of these poems in different publications like the Arab World and some magazine and others, and that's when we decided to do it. And in fact, we did that. We translated something like close to 70 poems by numerous poets. These poets were people like Mahmoud Darwish, Rashid Hussein, Samih, of course, توفيق زياد, Salim Jubran, Nizar Qabbani, Fadwa Tuqan, Arshad Tawfiq, Yusuf Hamdan, Abdul Rahman Muhammad Rafi', Hadi Abdul Hadi, Fawzi Jurius Abdullah. All of them, except for Qabbani and Arshad Tawfiq, were Palestinians. All of these, we had a very difficult time, by the way. Once we finished getting the book published, we tried something like 12 different publishers, and we couldn't get it published. And ultimately, it was published by an African-American press known as Drum and Spear Press, and it came out in 1970, and it did quite well, actually. They they sold something like 10,000 copies at that time. I'm not going to repeat a great deal about al-Qasim and his poetry. I just would like to say a few words about him. In many ways, al-Qasim was a Palestinian poet whose poetry was also a revolt against not only against Israeli society and its policies and attitudes towards the Palestinians, but also against corrupt Arab government and against the rigid and outdated traditions of Palestinian and Arab society. He made numerous calls for a break with traditions which he said felt that they were outdated and in fact changed his people and changed the Arab people. He wanted to, and they made them, in many ways, made them defenseless against their opponents. He also, al-Qasim's language was new in many ways, as was the poetry of people like Darwish at that and several of the other poets. It was new in a way that it created a metaphoric and symbolic atmosphere that transformed the meaning of the words and contained ancient symbols and hidden meanings that could be only discovered in the atmosphere of the homeland, Palestine in this case. In al-Qasim's poetry, love of the homeland, the woman, and the land merged together as symbols of love, of dignity, and of humanity. Al-Qasim was also something that is not that well known about him because that he also was very conscious about the struggle of the Palestinian people, but also about the struggles of other peoples. He, in many of his poems, he referred to what was going on in Vietnam, the struggle of the African-American peoples, the civil rights movement. He was also very much conscious in many ways about what was going on in Aden at that time, the struggle against colonialism, in addition to the struggle of the Palestinians against Israeli occupation. And in many ways, he also wrote he wrote more than one poem, actually, about Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. And this was something that showed that his consciousness, his awareness, that sometimes the struggle of the Palestinians is the same struggle of many oppressed people all over the world. One of the issues that I wanted to touch about, and probably the first poem I wanted to read, is this poem where he expresses sometimes his resentment of some of the outdated traditions and beliefs. He wrote a poem that's in many ways contains scornful references to the older traditions, and it was an ironic, moving, and forceful poem which is titled Anti-Aircraft Amulets. It's high noon. The semicircle of the sun beats down the street. The chickens cluck as they hear the thump of heavy boots, and my father loads stupid bullets into the remnants of a rifle. Between the persistent calls of his comrades, the Barwa was lost, the battle against Atlit. He also goes on to write about a number of other poems, and he, very much like several of the other, I would call them the Tamuzian poets, poets who went back to the ancient myths, ancient symbols of Middle Eastern society. These great poets were people like Sayyab, Badr Shakir Sayyab, Khalil Hawi, and a number of others who influenced people like al-Qasim and some of the other writers. One of his poems in this area is called In the 20th Century. For centuries, he said, for centuries I did not hate, but now I am forced to raise my untiring spear in the face of the dragon, to draw a sword in the face of Baal, to become Elijah in the 20th century. For centuries I did not apostate, but now I strike at the gods in my heart, the gods that sold my people in the 20th century. For centuries I did not turn visitors away from my door. Then one morning I opened my eyes to find my food stolen, my wife strangled, my children's back full of wounds. For centuries I was a poet in the bands of the Sufis, but now I am an erupting volcano in the 20th century. Also, al-Qasim was very much like, as I said, many of the universal poets who focused on issues beyond their own society. Perhaps one of these poems, the important poem, comes from Job's diary, and he wrote several of these poems. He said, for centuries it was said that there are winds, that there are pellets, and there is, it's told, a seed, germinating a soul into the rock, opening a road to the sun. What if I stab my dagger into the seed, the rock, and the sun? It's said that there are winds and pellets and roots, that despair does not blight. Another poem from Job's diary is titled As Usual. As usual, it's provocative today. The toll of the dead rises in Haiphong. In Aden, they killed 6 children. In Israel, mourning, they commemorate the victory over Nazism, the memory of a human slaughter. The Army Chief of Staff threatens Syria. Nothing new. Job's diary, also in another one of Job's diaries, he writes, all the reports declare I never fought against God. Why am I taught by pain? Well, hear me. Whisper into the image. Job's curse arise, arise. Job's curse revolt, and listen to my cry. Job, do not submit to agony, resist the pain. Another poem, which is I found quite moving and also in the same tradition, is known as the Psalm of Isaiah's grandchildren. We, Isaiah's grandchildren, call him. We call his kindly face trembling behind the veil of tears. Isaiah's grandchildren, we call him angrily crying, "O Isaiah, you have slept for centuries. In your absence, the city became a harlot, its silver tainted, its wine diluted with water. Tell them, O struggling Isaiah, of the widow's bereavement. Speak to them of this land's disgrace. Struggling Isaiah, the swords will be turned into plowshares, and the spears of the people into scythes. No nation will raise its sword against another, that little ones may not know war or bloodletting. Alleluia, alleluia. God of glory, we warred too long. We killed and were killed. Our blood was spilled. For centuries, we also spilled it. God of glory, we have been tested too long, and we have come to rest. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. One very interesting poem I found, and he sort of sends a message to the American people, talks about Chicago. He says, how do we reach you, slums of Chicago? How is the spark to reach you? How is the fire to be born? Skyscrapers, stacked huts, stretch your arms out of the darkness, for the big banner spreads its warmth, its light forever. The jazz band club in New York, the black man is hungry and tearful. The wolves roam the forest, the current overpowering, and the conscience of the statue shaken. And the heart of night, the wind is frozen, and the waves of the sea unmoving. How is the message to reach you, deaf Washington, with the humming of the machine? In Vietnam, slaughter, and you export cokes and medicine to the sad moon, and you sweep over the blood of victims. How is the message to reach you? Descendants of old Abe, my voice has become hoarse, and the wind has become tired of my shouts. Descendants of old Abe, shake the marble of history. Rise to the sky and halt, for the earth grumbles the rivers of blood. Another very powerful, actually, and I will read one or two, maybe two more poems. One is the poem called Enemy of the Sun, which actually we used as the title piece for our book, in which, and actually, Shawki just read a few lines from it. He said, I may, if you wish, lose my livelihood. I may sell my shirt and bed. I may work as a stone cutter, a street sweeper, a porter. I may clean your stores or rummage your garbage for food. I may lie down hungry, O enemy of the sun, but I shall not compromise, and to the last pulse in my veins I shall resist. You may take the last strip of my land, feed my youth to prison cells. You may plunder my heritage. You may burn my books, my poems, or feed my flesh to the dogs. You may spread a web of terror on the roofs of my village, O enemy of the sun, but I shall not compromise, and to the last pulse in my veins I shall resist. You may put out the light in my eyes. You may deprive me of my mother's kisses. You may curse my father, my people. You may distort my history. You may deprive my children of a smile and of life's necessities. You may fool my friends with a borrowed face. You may build walls of hatred around me. You may glue my eyes to humiliations, O enemy of the sun, but I shall not compromise. And to the last pulse in my veins I shall resist. O enemy of the sun, the decorations are raised at the port, the ejaculations fill the air, a glow in the heart, and in the horizon a sail is seen, challenging the wind and the depths. It is Ulysses returning home from the sea of loss. It's the return of the sun, of my exiled ones, and for her sake and his, I swear I shall not compromise, and to the last pulse in my veins I shall resist, resist, and resist. And the last poem, I very much like it. It's a short poem that I think says a great deal about Samih al-Qasim and where he comes from and what is he all about. It's titled, I Walk. I walk, straight as a ramrod, head high, I walk, an olive branch and a dove in my palm, and on my shoulders my coffin, and I walk, my heart a red moon, my heart a garden, my lips a rainy sky, at times love, and I walk, straight as a ramrod, head high, an olive branch, and a dove in my palm, and I on my shoulder, my coffin. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghareeb. Now, I would like to call our resident Palestinian poet here and member of our board, Mr. Walid Keilani, to contribute a original poem in commemoration of Samih al-Qasim.
السلام عليكم وأسعدتم مساء. رحم الله أبا وطن. لقد كان اسم ابن سميح الأكبر وطن. هو فقد الوطن وسلب منه الوطن، فأراد أن يكون له وطن فخلف وطنا. في هذه القصيدة استخدمت عدة أشياء من قصائد سميح نفسها وبنيت عليها قصيدتي، وأريد أن أقول وأيضا بنيت على علاقاته مع محمود درويش وأشياء مختلفة. سميح ومحمود درويش وتوفيق زياد يشتركون في شيء واحد، إنهم سجنوا ويشتركون في تنافسهم للحب، في حبهم لفلسطين، وأيضا يشتركون بأن المطرب الكبير مرسيل خليفة غنى لهم قصائد رائعة يعرفها الجميع. والآن أريد أن أبدأ لكم القصيدة، ومن أجمل ما غنى له مرسيل خليفة وما كتب منتصب القامة، ولكن أنا لا أريد هو يقول منتصب القامة أمشي، أنا أريد أن أعتبر الشخص التالي منتصب القامة يمشي، وأبدأ من ذلك. في ذكرى شاعر فلسطين والإنسانية سميح القاسم: منتصب القامة يمشي، مرفوع الهامة يمشي، كالمارد يخرج من أعماق البحر ويهبط من فوق الشمس، ويقود الأحياء بأشعار الثورة من قلب النعش، يسكن بقلوب الناس ويسكن بعيون الناس ويسكن في أعصاب الناس وضمير الأحرار وأوتار الحس. وقف أمام الغاصب حافي القدمين، يحمل كل فلسطين كما حمل العالم أطلس فوق الرقبة والكتفين، فالحر الوطني يرى الوطن على رقبته دين. تمرد، لم يخضع مثل القطعان، ما طأطأ هامته للذل، وتجرع كأس العسل المسموم، أو ساوم حتى يتمتع في رغد العيش. وما ابتعد وفضل أن يسكت وينام، واستمتع بحياة الأغنام، وقال: اللهم كفاني وعلي بنفسي. ضحى من أجل فلسطين، وواجه بالصدر العاري أسلحة المحتل من الشرطة والجيش، ورأى باب الحرية في الأوطان موصودا ومحاطا بالجدران وبألسنة النار وأعمدة دخان، ورأى فيه الثعلب والثعبان، لم يرهبه السجن ولا السجان، ولم يخشى القمع الوحشي، ومضى يمشي ومضى يمشي ومضى يمشي. وأقول: تقدم، لا بد سينتصر الشعب المظلوم بأرض فلسطين، والمحتل المغرور سيهزم والأسوار ستهدم. كان سميحا لكن لم يتسامح ويسامح في أرض فلسطين، ولم ينس فلسطين ولن تنساه فلسطين. قبل رحيل العملاق الشاعر قال: تمنيت بأن أبقى حيا حتى أشهد نصر بلادي وأعلم كل العالم كيف يكون الفرح. الفقرة التالية مبنية على قصيدة رثى فيها سميح محمود درويش. الفقرة هاي: سميح ومحمود خير الرفاق إلى جنة الآخرة، جوادان بالشعر والنثر، أبحاركم زاخرة، عصافيركم، قصائدهم يعني هذه اللي قالها، عصافيركم لم تزل تحلق في أرضنا الساحرة، ترفرف فوق سهول الجليل وفي القدس والناصرة. عصافيركم ما أتت للديار مهاجرة أو أتت عابرة، ولكنها أطلقت من أديم الوجود إلى جوها طائرة. تحدت جنود الظلام وكانت على صبرها قادرة، ولا بد لليل أن ينجلي قريبا، ولا بد للظلم من آخرة. إنا نحتاج لأمثال سميح فقد اختل بنا الميزان. يا جنديا للعدل يقاوم من أجل حقوق الإنسان، يا منتصب القامة، يا مرفوع الهامة، يا قلب القمر الأحمر والبستان الأخضر، ذي العوسج والريحان، شفتاك سماء تمطر نارا حينا حبا أحيان. يا حارس أشجار الزيتون وحارس أشجار الليمون وحارس أشجار اللوز وحارس نبع البستان، يا نفس الأحرار النابض بفلسطين وفي كل مكان، يا جبلا يسكن في جبل يدعى حيدر قد عز الجبلان. يا نسرا حلق بأعالي الرامة بالشعر بلا جنحان، قدماك على الأرض وجذورك راسخة في الأعماق، ورأسك يشمخ فوق أعالي الغيم ووجهك للرحمن. ما مات سميح، ما زالت أنفاس الأشعار تحوم بأرض فلسطين، في كل مكان، في القدس وفي الناصرة وفي حيفا، في يافا وجنين وسهول بني عامر، فيها ناي وحنين وأنين جراح لا زالت تنزف في دير ياسين. والظلم تفشى في عالمنا المجنون، وسنين مرت من بعد سنين، واتسع السجن وصار كبيرا واستوعب كل الناس الباقين. وسميح يحمل مزمار الحب الوطني ويعزف للمجروحين من المنكوبين المغتربين أو السجناء المقهورين، ويقاتل من أجل جميع الناس المظلومين جموع المغتصبين. سيعود المارد من وسط العتمة كالنجم الساطع، كالنجم الثاقب، يتصدى الظلم الفاشي وإرهاب المحتل الغاصب، ويقول اسمعوا، ويقول: لقد ذبلت أغصان الزيتون، وأراكم يا أبنائي تمشون بدرب مرصود مسدود، فرجعت إليكم منتصب القامة أمشي، وعلى كتفي أحمل نعشي لأقود جموع المنتصرين، فما زلت بأرض فلسطين وسأبقى في وطني هذه الأرض إلى يوم الدين. وستزهر أرض فلسطين بأغانيه، وسيبقى حيا ينشد أشعار الثورة لما بطريق الوحدة والعودة معه نمشي نمشي ونقول لكل العالم إنا آتون وآتون، نحمل بأيادينا قصف الزيتون يحملها أطفال فلسطين المنتصرون. شكرا لكم.
Wow, thank you very much for that fantastic presentation of original poetry in commemoration of Samih al-Qasim. A number of our presenters this evening have noted the relationship between Samih al-Qasim and Mahmoud Darwish. And one of course, we've heard much about Samih al-Qasim's poetry. But one interesting part of his contributions was a correspondence between him and Mahmoud Darwish, which tells us much about their relationship and also about their thinking at the time and the unique perspective of poets for Palestine during that era. And we will have a presentation on that correspondence and that relationship now by Zeina Azzam. Zeina?
First of all, thank you so much, Jerusalem Fund, Yusuf Munayyer, Samih al-Qasim, for inviting me. I'm really honored and humbled to be with a panel of such distinguished speakers. As Yusuf said, the poets Samih al-Qasim and Mahmoud Darwish wrote some letters to each other in the late 80s. The two of them have a very special relationship. They've been called جناحي الشعر المقاوم, or the two flanks of resistance poetry, and شطري البرتقالة, two sections of an orange, owing to their shared childhoods, their deep friendship, and long-standing work as poets and writers and political activists. Although they're primarily known for their poetry, they explored the genre of letter writing in the pages of Al-Yawm al-Sabi', which was a magazine published in Paris in Arabic. This is between 1986 and 88. They wrote these letters to each other knowing that they would be published and that they would be public. So these are not just random letters that were found later. These are very purposeful letters that they wrote to each other. And they formed sort of a coherent discussion that kind of evolved and went on and on. A compilation of these letters appeared first in a book titled Al-Rasail. And here's the book. It was published in Haifa by Arabesque Publishing House, and this one has a foreword by Emil Habibi. I went to the Library of Congress when I was doing this research and found in their archives the actual magazines and made copies of just a couple of the pages. So you can see they always had a picture of each of the, well, this is actually, these are both of Samih al-Qasim, but they would have a picture of each of the poets next to each other, and I'll say something about that in a moment. The book is divided into three huzam, or sheaves or bundles. The first huzma comprises two poems, and one of them is a poem that Dr. Kassis mentioned. It's called Taghribatun, written by Samih al-Qasim to Mahmoud Darwish, and Mahmoud Darwish also wrote one back to him. The second huzba is actually a bunch of letters. There were 29 of them. Half were by Mahmoud Darwish and half by al-Qasim, and those happened between 86 and 87. And the third huzma started about 7 months later and comprises another 10 more letters, 5 from each one, and these go into 1988. With the exception of one letter written from Tunis, all of Darwish's letters were from Paris, were written in Paris, and Al-Qasim wrote mostly in Haifa, with one entry, a couple of entries from Ar-Rama and one from Jerusalem. Many of these letters were penned just 1 week apart, clearly in response to the other. And at several junctures, however, there was more time that elapsed. And as I mentioned and showed you, that these letters kind of appeared sometimes individually, sometimes next to each other. And in a way, by having the photographs of each poet and their words next to each other, the magazine sort of accomplished something that was hard to accomplish because Mahmoud Darwish was exiled and was unable to go back home. And so it kind of put them together in one place and had them have a dialogue with each other. I'd like to make some remarks about the contents of the letters, and I'll be reading a few excerpts. These letters, as far as I know, have not been translated into English, so all the translations that you'll hear are mine. And reading all of them, you can see that Mahmoud Darwish and Samih al-Qasim were very much part of a global literary movement and were considering new notions of perspectives between themselves as writers and their readers. In their letters, they cite and comment on numerous contemporary world authors whom they were reading at the time, such as Umberto Eco, Miguel Ángel Asturias, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Norman Mailer, Graham Greene, Milan Kundera, Yashar Kamal, Shirley Hoffman, Anton Shammas, and this is just a few of them. And as well, of course, it's important to note that both poets were also very much fundamentally grounded in Arabic, classical Arabic poetry and literature. They often cited passages from the Mu'allaqat, from famous poets like Imr al-Qais and al-Mutanabbi, in addition to works from the Al-Andalus era and battles, tribes, dynasties, and political figures in Arab history. In the first sentence of his letter to al-Qasim, Darwish immediately asks, "And what is the value of two poets exchanging letters? The root of the story is our strong desire that we leave around us, after us, and in us a shared legacy and a witness to the experience of a generation that conspired against the light of hope and the fire of grief, and to offer a resounding apology for the break that occurred during a time in our lives so that we may bring back our former connection to ourselves. This will allow us to pursue this harmonious duet, our duet." In his letter, in response, al-Qasim responds by characterizing their letter writing as a reunion of sorts and agrees it's about the importance of connecting with their past and with each other. He says it's up to us to restore memory. In fact, the themes of memory and connection and reconnection are pervasive in this collection of letters. Al-Qasim says, "That was our joint poem in Ar-Rama and Deir al-Asad and Haifa, and our shared love, our shared prison, our shared struggle, our shared newspaper, our shared memory. That world filled with lasting happiness and boiling up with the bliss of provocation and the arrogance of pain. It was the spring source that we discovered, and here we are, returning to it." A bit later, al-Qasim writes, "How I am tortured by the memory of the days we call an-Nakba." Indeed, both poets relate their personal experiences of the 1948 war with great detail in many of the letters, remembering and describing the tragic event of dislocation and then their experience of returning to their original homes. Darwish's village, Al-Birwe, as we know, was demolished by the Israelis in 1948, and a kibbutz was built on its rubble. He tells a story of his first pilgrimage back to Al-Birwe when he found a lone carob tree, an abandoned church, and one of the kibbutz dwellers, a Jewish cowherder from Yemen, who claimed that, "I am returning to my country." Darwish looks at him and utters the same words, and he says, "I'm returning to my country." So there, the competing claims to historic Palestine were thus laid out, yet the new Yemeni arrival would stay, and Darwish's family would have to relocate to Deir al-Asad. There are many related themes in these letters, including presence and absence, al-hudur wal-ghiyab, inside and outside, al-dakhil wal-kharij, staying and leaving, al-baqa wal-rahil, departure and return, al-dhihab wal-iyab, or al-rahil wal-awda, and the bridging of all of these dualities. Darwish, living in exile, asks al-Qasim, "Be my solid bridge and offer to the discussion of inside and outside a healthy continuity. Make up for the absence so that I may rejoice. As long as you are there, I am there." So Darwish views writing these letters as a vehicle of his own return from outside, with al-Qasim on the inside. Each poet often throws out these opposites in their letters, expecting a response from his friend. In this way, the conversation evolves and moves forward and changes continually, so that an idea or question one author initiates is elaborated and modified in the next letter. 4 months into the correspondence, in the 15th letter, Darwish asks again, "Where are these letters taking us? This text open to the beginning and the end. What is the beginning and what is the end?" And al-Qasim responds, "I imagine that each one of us writes to himself when he writes to his friend, and writes about his brother when he writes about himself, until everything is mixed up. Man al-mursal ilayh. Who is the sender and who is the recipient?" So this discussion kind of reinforces the notion that the letters are written with a reader in mind also, and who this reader is drawn into the thinking and life experiences of each of the writers. In addition, it's important to note that we read any given letter from at least 3 points of view, that of the intended or actual recipient, as well as that of the writer and of our own. So, for example, when I read Darwish's letters, I'm looking at them as Darwish wrote them, I'm looking at them as al-Qasim read them, and then I'm looking at them from my own very subjective and personal point of view. And so this whole idea of the reader is very important, this third party, because these were meant to be public letters and published in a very well-known Arabic magazine. In fact, from what the two writers say in their letters, many people reading their letters and were affected by them. Al-Qasim says that, quote, "People are looking forward to reading our letters. They see things in them that we may not see." He continues with a comical entry about a visit to a dentist. When he is in what he calls the electric execution chair, al-kursi al-i'dam al-kahrabai, he's sitting there experiencing a toothache. He says that, quote, "The dentists, nurses, the patients, male, female, tall and short, blonde and dark-haired city and country folk were all going on and on, offering their personal opinions about the letters, asking him questions, while Al-Qasim, writhing in pain that was being prolonged by their commentary, was swearing under his breath at Darwish." The public letters of Darwish and Al-Qasim talk about the experiences of dispossession, exile, political marginalization. And these are the experiences of many, of course, in the Arab world, especially their fellow Palestinians. So even the more personal accounts about their feelings of growing older, having writer's block, losing a parent, and feeling lonely are human themes that transcend the personal experiences and speak to everyone. In his last letter of the second Huzma, Darwish tells Al-Qasim that he and thousands of readers will be awaiting his next letter. Indeed, 20 years later, in 2008, the famous Egyptian journalist Mohammed Hassanein Haikal said, in retrospect, that by reading the letters, he developed the taste for reviving the art of letter writing in Arabic literature. So there's a lot of evidence to indicate that the readership for these letters was large and very vast. Looking at the time when they were writing the letter, one sees that much was unfolding in each of the writers' lives during these 26 months. Darwish had just finished writing his book, Memory for Forgetfulness, Dhakirat al-Nisyan, a poetry collection called It's a Song, or Hiya Ughniya, and worked on drafting a new Palestinian national charter with Edward Said. Al-Qasim published a poetry book, La Asta'dhin Ahadan, was working on an anthology of Palestinian poetry, and started the Union of Arab Writers in Palestine, Israel, and he became its first president. Both traveled extensively to speak at international conferences and commemorations of historical events. In the larger world context, both writers discussed political events and offered lots of commentary. For example, Darwish wrote about Shimon Peres visiting Morocco in July of '86 to visit with King Hassan II. This was a very frustrated and angry letter that complained about the recurrent habit of Arab leaders to try to speak for the Palestinians. Al-Qasim talks about the writers and poets who are serving sentences and being tortured in Ansar III prison in the Negev desert. He tells Darwish that he's written a letter to Al-Ittihad newspaper about this issue. At one point, Darwish remarks that it was in prisons that he and Al-Qasim learned their first lessons about freedom and realized that poetry was their weapon in their battle for staying in Palestine. He comments critically about what he perceives as American and Israeli conceptions of human rights, that they pertain only to Soviet Jews having the right to immigrate to the United States or Israel. Al-Qasim employs a tongue-in-cheek satire at times. He talks about the low water levels in Lake Tiberias and says that if they continue this way, Israel will take the matter to the United Nations to ask for the waters of the Nile and Euphrates. He also makes fun of U.S. President Ronald Reagan, saying that Reagan might not have read Walt Whitman, but surely he knows Walt Disney. The most salient event, of course, by far during the course of the public correspondence of Darwish and Al-Qasim was the beginning of the First Intifada in December of 1987. Both writers seem to feel a mixture of guarded optimism, of pride, hope, and frustration with the Arab world. Al-Qasim writes, 200 million Arabs are finding their lost dignity, karamatuhum, through the stones thrown by a Palestinian youth who probably grew up naked in a camp. Why? Why don't the millions of Arabs return the dignity to Palestinian youth instead of the other way around? Darwish remarks that the cultured Arab remains confused by the Intifada, but he says that the voice comes from there, هناك, من بلاغة الحجر, من بساطة الحجر, from the eloquence and simplicity of the stone. Indeed, rocks and stones became a potent symbol of the Intifada and of Palestinian resistance to occupation. Why is the world so taken by our stone? Al-Qasim asks. In addition to their pride and positive feelings about the Intifada, both writers expressed many other emotions and other issues. Several times in their letters, they discussed the feelings of guilt they had about the death of their friend, Rashid Hussein. Al-Qasim started the conversation saying that he felt badly that he didn't answer some of Rashid's letters and take some blame for his death. Like Al-Qasim, Darwish also says that he shares the blame for Rashid's tragic end. He asks, why didn't we write some letters to Rashid? Why didn't we write to the retired colonel of our soul? Why didn't we involve him in building bridges and appointments? Why did we leave him alone, all by himself in New York? The two also often write about language and about the act of writing. Darwish says, quote, in language we find our solutions. We marry the known with the unknown. We travel and return. Both mention periods when they have been unable to write in a rueful and a very concerned way. Al-Qasim includes a wonderful description of the trance one gets into when writing, حالة الكتابة. This is what he says. When your psychological and bodily state changes together, you are overcome by a trance. Your body temperature rises slightly. You see and you don't see. You hear and you don't hear, and nothing saves you from this unexpected, unforeseen imbalance except that complete merging between your soul, your body, your pen, and the bewitching paper that is held between your hands, like a woman in amorous rapture crying, take me. Perhaps one of the funnier anecdotes that Al-Qasim relates is about an incident in London. He prefaces the story with the quote from Dostoevsky that a criminal always goes back to the scene of his crime, and by extension, the expelled victim, and here we're talking about the Palestinian, goes back to become the ghost who attacks the British Empire. So this is what happened. It was kind of a comedy of errors. He was in London, and Scotland Yard arrests him and takes him into custody, and they just sort of appear at his doorstep. He experiences all sorts of angst while he's in custody, not knowing why he was being held, and wondering how long he would be jailed, or if he will be harmed. Finally, it's revealed that the British authorities think he's Mahmoud Darwish. They release him eventually on the same day, and they return him to the poetry reading at which he was supposed to read, To a Hero's Welcome. I'd like to, as a final thing, I'd like to read an excerpt of one letter of Samih al-Qasim to Mahmoud Darwish. You can find the entire letter on jadaliya.com. I'll just tell you quickly, he's responding to a letter of Darwish's, when Darwish is asking him, please go to the carob tree that we played around in our childhood and engrave our names on it. And so this is what he's saying to him. So it's actually a long letter. I'm just going to read you a short excerpt. So this is what Al-Qasim says. And you press in your letter, you press on me with a carob tree and your flowing tears. In response, I present you with a rich truth. Our beautiful friendship has its own particular concerns and its own uninterrupted, never-ending sorrows. We have dared to commit a mortal sin, the sin of completely and eternally conflating the human with the homeland, the person with the people, the individual with the cause. I sometimes ask myself, are we the ones who recite our poetry, or is it the homeland that sings it? Do we write the poem, or is it the poem that recites us? Where does the private and the public end? Can we call any of this about us private or personal? Sometimes I imagine that we have never loved a woman for herself, nor has a woman ever loved us for ourselves. I imagine that when we eat and walk and love and travel and become angry and happy, we do so in a trance called the homeland. Why tell you this? Because you have bequeathed to me your carob tree. So let me be frank with you about something. Since we have been apart from each other, and even perhaps ever since we have known each other, I have avoided the ruins of Al-Birwe, its olive trees, carobs, cactus. Whenever I pass by, I distract myself to avoid looking at it. And if I force myself to look at it directly, a horrible yellow scorpion immediately stings me in the heart and without mercy, and my journey is spoiled. Don't envy me for having stayed. Here is hell. There is hell. Hell until the day of heaven, the day when the children of Palestine will wave Palestinian flags as part of official ceremonies to welcome a state guest or as part of some sacred celebration, the feasts of return, freedom, and independence. My dear brother, please forgive me. I will not visit your childhood tree in Al-Birwe, and I will not engrave our two names on it. Simply and with complete honesty, I cannot do that. But there is something else I can do for my sake and yours. Engrave our names on the wind. I can etch the wind into the homeland. I can inscribe the homeland on my flesh. I can scatter my flesh in the poem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Zeina. Last but not least, of course, and we wanted to lead off with this, but we're very pleased to have with us Ambassador Clovis Maksoud to provide a closing comment on Samih al-Qasim. So, Ambassador Maksoud, please.
Good evening. I'm sorry to be late, but I want to say Tonight, the Palestine Center has rendered optimism inevitable amidst the fragmentation of pessimism that we are experiencing. So, the admonition of Samih al-Qasim to all of us at this moment: never give up. At this time, when we are witnessing the abandonment and the dethronement of reason amongst the Arab conditions and some leaders, when witnessing that revenge by the terrorists are derailing the centrality of Islamic civilization and the wholesomeness of Arab nationalism. Tonight, we have been told by all the recitations and speakers, it is forbidden to be hopeless. And it is this which has inspired people whose country has been usurped and not occupied, because there is no occupation in Palestine. There is a usurpation of part of Palestine and the conquest of the rest of Palestine. It is a lie, it is a distortion, it's a legal absurdity to say al-aradi al-muhtalla. There is no aradi muhtalla in Palestine. There is aradi mughtasaba, because when you establish settlements, you are conquering because you claim that that territory is your right. What we are witnessing today is really a cause for pessimism. But when you hear and listen to the poetry of Samih al-Qasim, the man whose territory of Palestine has been usurped, and witnessing the other part of Palestine being conquered, of course, there is the root resistance which makes any Palestinian or any Arab abdicate through so-called negotiations and compromise. It is in this context we are witnessing the ferocity of Israel manifested by the three ruthless, reckless, savage attacks on Gaza. It is a pathetic moment when Samih al-Qasim could not render another poem on Gaza before he died. We are living in an era where the quality of our literature and our narrative comes from the real, those who can articulate pain and dispossession and unhappiness and almost the pain of never giving hope amidst the ferocity of the Zionist project. It's a pain which is creative, which is innovative, which is giving. It is a pain which all of us suffer, but it is not a pain which leads us to hopelessness. Therefore, tonight, we give up pessimism. We consider the present fragmentation of the Arab national scene. We see the divisions along sectarian lines, Shias and Sunnis, Christians, as last week or 2 weeks ago, in defense of Christians, There is no such thing in defense of Christians. We are rooted as Christians, and Muslims, we are rooted as Muslims because every Arab Christian has the dimension of Muslim civilization in his heart, in his makeup, in his culture, and his destination. Yet, when political Islam considers itself the alternative to Arab nationalism, it loses its compass and it loses its civilized moment. And we were witnessing today when Islamic politics as an alternative to Arab nationalism يصبح الفلتان سائد كما هو الحال اليوم. Palestine تبقى البوصلة التي من خلالها نسترجع الوحدة العربية، وهذا هو التحدي للأجيال القادمة، أن تقرأ ما كتب أمثال درويش وأمثال كمال ناصر وأمثال حبيبنا الشاعر الذي نحتفل به هذه الليلة. لا يمكن لنا في هذا الظرف العصيب حيث بدا التشاؤم يسيطر على عقولنا وقلوبنا، وكأن لا أمل في استعادة المبادرة القومية العربية واستعادة فلسطين حقها وسلطتها وحقها في الوجود الكريم. نحن نواجه مشروع صهيوني داعشي يقول أفيد شريط المفكر والكاتب الفلسطيني عندما يبحث عن liberal Zionism، يقول في عام 1948 كنا في أزمة ضمير، ولكن تم الحل لهذه الأزمة. قتلنا أول مرة 300 مدني في سنة 48، وكانت وحشية، ولكن يبدو أن هذا القتل إما أن نتسامح وأن لا نقتل، وليس هناك إسرائيل. وإذا أصرينا على ضرورة هذا القتل الجماعي للمدنيين، عندئذ سوف يكون هناك إسرائيل. هذا من ضحايا الهولوكوست، افتعلوا هولوكوست ثاني في فلسطين ولا يزالوا بالتقسيط يعملون ذلك، وأكبر دليل هو ما يقومون به من وحشية في طيرانهم في غزة 3 مرات في هذا الجيل. لذلك لا تتشاءموا، لا تتخلوا عن الأمل، لأن مثل ما زرعوا هؤلاء في شعرهم بذور البقاء والتنمية والمستدامة، هذه ضمانات توفر لنا المناعة القومية شعرا، ولكن من صميم المعاناة. هم الذين علمونا تهذيب العقل وتهذيب السلوك والنضال والكفاح الدائم والمستديم. نحن لا نقتل كبديل أو متمم لحقوقنا، نحن نسعى بالشعر، بالحوار، بالتنقيب، نسعى على الإقناع، لا كما الصهيونية تعمل على الإملاء. من هذا المنطلق أرجو and I hope أن لا نستقيل من الأمل مهما تعقدت الأمور كما هي الحال اليوم، مهما حصل التفتيت. الأجيال الجديدة سوف تعمل على التكامل العربي، التكامل العربي الممهد للوحدة، للتنمية الإنسانية، للمعرفة. هذا الظرف الذي نحن فيه يجعل التشاؤم منطقيا، ولكن ليس كل ما هو منطقي في الظاهر هو حقيقي في الواقع. لذلك اليوم the Palestine Center has restored the centrality of Palestine as our compass to achieve Arab unity and development and hope. Thank you very much.